Yesterday, we caught up with Professor Tim Benton, who's the UK's food security champion, in between sessions at a food conference. We showed him some of your comments from the Food Systems Forum, and then we asked him for his take on the food system. To help us make sense of all the different parts of the food system, we've created this map. You'll be seeing it again throughout the activities, and we asked Tim to talk through it.
GFS is a partnership of the main public bodies with an interest in food. And our job really is to think about the challenges of food, think about where we know there are issues to do with lack of knowledge, and try and find ways of filling in that knowledge gap. Everything's interconnected. You can't think about food choice without thinking about food production. We have to think about the system as a whole and then look to see whether it's in manufacturing, retail, distribution, our behaviour with the food, our choice of food, well-being, nutrition, environment, production. Which part of those systems will we be able to intervene that has the biggest overall impact? And it might be that reducing waste has a far bigger impact about the total amount of food available than increasing production. By choosing food that has a big climate impact, we're making the environmental factors worse, which are making the production issues worse for the next 20 or 30 years.
So let's look at the first activity in the food system in a bit more detail. Tim's going to tell us a little bit about production.
If we look ahead and demand for food is growing faster than we can supply it, and if the climate is changing, then you have immediately that kind of notion that if we don't want to take more land up, which we don't, you have to increase the productivity per unit area.
Okay, so that's more food from the same place.
So that's more food from the same area. For me, one of the big challenges is around climate change, that whichever way you cut it, our weather patterns are changing radically. In the UK, we're increasingly having to plan for both drought and floods at the same time. Processed food is food that has been mixed, manufactured, modified substantially through the production process. There are a lot of issues to do with that in people's mind, because effectively, if you think about almost any bit of processed food, it's going to have some generic protein in, and that's typically soy from South America. It will have some generic vegetable oil in, and that will be typically palm oil from Indonesia or Malaysia. It will have sugar or salt, depending on whether it's sweet or savoury, and the sugar was most likely to come from Brazil or Caribbean or somewhere like that. Salt might come from China. So there are a handful of kind of generic ingredients that are in almost everything. It's very easy with processed food to end up with something which is palatable, nice, we like it, it's kind of addictive, but it's dreadfully bad from a nutritional perspective because it's just full of empty calories.
So one of the issues that people raised in the forum was the idea that food that's bad for us and processed seems to be cheaper than the things we know are good for us. We asked him to explain to us why it is that this seems to be the case.
Meat or fish or fresh fruit, fresh vegetables and so on, those aren't produced at scale and they become more expensive. And there are lots of nice graphs in the literature that show a kind of negative relationship between calorie density, so lots of calories, lots of sugar, and price and nutritional density.
We've talked a lot on the forum over the last few weeks about where our food comes from, but is it really true that local food is better?
Buying local has many advantages. Principal one for me is that it kind of, you think about food, it connects you to the production of food, it makes you realise that food is something other than fuel to buy at the cheapest price. So that kind of localism is a good thing from that perspective. But people often assume that local is more sustainable because you have got lower freight costs because you're not transporting stuff around the world. But an American study a couple of years ago suggested that if in the American market, a family of four switched for 1 day a week from beef to pork or chicken, that saving in greenhouse gas emissions was more than if the whole of the wheat shopping had been grown in the garden. We have a food system that is creating ill health at the extent it costs around £2,500 to £3,000 per household on average. And at the same time, our food system is driving environmental degradation, particularly around greenhouse gas emissions. Cars, heating, air conditioning, lighting, washing machines, all of those things, if we're buying any of those, we think about a fuel efficiency. When we go into a supermarket, we don't think about the efficiency of its production, but yet the efficiency of its production is probably far more important than the efficiency of driving a car or any of the other things when it comes to our total household greenhouse gas emissions. Our choice of what we eat then also impacts on the production environment and the livelihoods of farmers where the food is produced, whether that's in Brazil or whether that's in Cornwall. Or whatever. Availability is it in the country, access is can I get hold of it, utilisation is what do I do with it.
So how does this all come together?
For me, part of the issue about the future is how can we change diets to make them both healthy and lower impact on the environment, and that's the whole kind of sustainable nutrition agenda. It's not just about is there enough food for us to eat what we want, but it's how can we provide food that fulfills our needs nutritionally but is also sustainable.